The wind howled like a wounded animal, gnawing at every inch of exposed skin with a ferocity that felt almost personal. I staggered through the snow, my legs heavy, my breaths shallow and burning in my chest. The sun was sinking fast, just a dull orange glow on the horizon, and with it, the last remnants of warmth and hope. The snowstorm had passed, but its ghost lingered in the air, thick and freezing, wrapping me in a suffocating silence. I had to keep moving. Stopping meant death. The creature, whatever it was, had torn through our camp in a frenzy of claws and shadow. It came in the middle of the blizzard, swift and unseen, only noticed when it was too late. Screams cut short, the crunch of bones, and then nothing. My heart still pounded with the memory of it. I hadn't dared to look back as I fled, stumbling into the white abyss, leaving behind the sounds of my team's last moments. I could only hope that it had stayed distracted long enough to give me this head start. It was the only thing I had now. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I trudged forward, each step sinking deeper into the icy wasteland. My parka clung to my body, offering little warmth in the biting cold. Every breath formed a small cloud of vapor, quickly stolen by the wind. I had no idea where I was going. No map, no compass, just a desperate need to get away from that thing, away from the massacre I'd left behind. I knew the tundra could kill me just as easily as the creature could, but at least out here I stood a chance. The sky dimmed further, shadows lengthening over the endless white landscape. I had maybe an hour before darkness swallowed everything. A part of me wanted to collapse right there. Let the snow cover me, let the cold numb me to the pain of it all. But something kept me going. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the distant, flickering ember of survival instinct that hadn't yet been snuffed out. Whatever it was, it dragged my frozen limbs forward. I scanned the horizon, hoping for anything, some sign of shelter, a break in the monotony of the ice. But there was nothing, just more snow and cold. And then, faintly, I thought I saw movement. Something dark against the white. My breath caught in my throat. Was it the creature? And it followed me. My fingers tightened around the flare gun, still strapped to my chest. One shot. That's all I had left. I hesitated, heart pounding in my ears, straining my eyes against the encroaching dusk. The wind picked up again, sending flurries of snow into the air, obscuring my vision. When it cleared, the shape was gone. Had it even been there in the first place? Was my mind playing tricks on me, cracking under the strain of fear and exhaustion? I shook my head, forcing myself to keep moving. I couldn't afford to lose it now, not when survival was still an option, however slim. As the last of the daylight slipped away, I spotted a shadow in the distance. This one real, solid. A rocky outcrop, jagged and black against the snow. Relief washed over me. If I could make it there, I'd have some cover for the night. Maybe I could even find a crevice to huddle in, away from the wind and the open air, away from it. I picked up my pace, stumbling and half running toward the rocks. My legs screamed in protest, but I ignored them. I had to make it, had to survive. Behind me, somewhere far off in the distance, a growl echoed across the tundra. I didn't look back. As I trudged through the snow, my mind kept circling back to what had happened. The only explanation that made any sense was a polar bear. They were massive, unpredictable, and fierce enough to rip apart a group of unsuspecting researchers. But something about that didn't sit right. I'd seen bears before. None of them moved like that. None of them sounded like that. The roar that had shattered the storm was deeper, more primal, and the way it had torn through our camp. It wasn't the lumbering brutality of a bear. It was something else, something faster and far more deliberate. The way it hunted us didn't match up with the behavior of any animal I knew. It was as if it had been targeting us, stalking and striking with a calculated ferocity that I couldn't shake from my mind. I shook my head, trying to banish the thoughts, but they clung to me like the cold. The wind picked up again, whipping snow across my face, blurring the world into a smothering white haze. I had to focus on the present, on putting one foot in front of the other. Thinking too much about what had happened would only slow me down, make me careless. Then I heard it, panting, heavy and rhythmic, cutting through the wind behind me. My stomach lurched with dread. A creature. It had followed me. Panic surged in my veins, and I broke into a desperate run, my legs screaming in protest. The world tilted. The snow shifted beneath my feet as I stumbled forward, trying to outrun whatever was behind me. The panting grew louder, closer. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. I pushed myself harder, faster, but exhaustion was taking its toll. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, and before I knew it, my legs gave out beneath me. I collapsed into the snow, gasping for air, expecting to feel claws sinking into my flesh at any moment. My mind raced, replaying the gruesome images of my team's fate. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the end. But instead of teeth or claws, I felt warmth. A soft, wet nose nudging my cheek. I opened my eyes slowly, blinking against the light snowflakes that had begun to fall again. A pair of blue eyes stared back at me, curious and friendly. A dog. A husky. Her thick fur marked with patterns that were more wolf-like than the typical sled dog, but the smaller frame, curled tail, and those bright blue eyes gave her away. She tilted her head. Her ears perked up as she watched me. Around her neck was a collar with a small name tag that read, Yuki. The sight of it was so surreal, so impossibly out of place in this frozen wasteland, that for a moment I wondered if I was hallucinating. Yuki, I whispered, my voice hoarse. She wagged her tail in response, a slight curve of motion that seemed almost reassuring. She licked my face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a small flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with physical heat. I reached out a trembling hand, letting it rest on her fur. She was real. I wasn't alone. Yuki nuzzled against me, and I found myself laughing, a broken, exhausted sound that echoed in the silence. The panting I had heard wasn't from the creature. It was her. She must have been following me, watching me as I ran in blind terror. I didn't know where she had come from, or why she was out here all alone. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All I knew was that somehow this dog had found me, and for the first time since the attack, I didn't feel like I was running for my life. I managed to push myself onto my elbows, still catching my breath as I looked into Yuki's bright blue eyes. She stared back at me with an almost human-like curiosity, as if waiting for me to say something. "Now what are you doing all the way out here, huh?" I asked, my voice hoarse and cracked. I reached out and scratched behind her ear. She simply tilted her head to the side, her ears twitching, but didn't offer any answers. Of course, she didn't. She was just a dog. A dog in the middle of the Arctic wilderness where no dog really should be. I sighed and tried to stand, but my legs wobbled beneath me. Yuki nudged me gently with her nose, urging me to get up. I couldn't help but smile at her persistence. Despite everything, she seemed determined to keep me going. And then the world shifted again. A low, distant rumble cut through the air, rolling across the tundra like a distant avalanche. My body tensed instinctively, and I saw Yuki's ears perk up, her posture going rigid. Her fur bristled, and a deep guttural growl rumbled from her throat, an unsettling sound from a creature that had been so friendly just moments ago. Whatever it was, she didn't like it, and neither did I. I squinted into the distance, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound, but the vast whiteness offered no clues. It was as if the tundra itself was growling, as if the ice and snow had come alive, angry and relentless. Before I could react, Yuki barked sharply, snapping me out of my trance. She turned towards me, her eyes intense, and then she dropped into a playful bow, wagging her tail with an urgency that made it clear this wasn't a game. She barked again, then nudged me with her nose, the message unmistakable. She wanted me to follow her. All right, I muttered, struggling to my feet. My muscles protested more, but I pushed through the pain, knowing I had no other choice. I wasn't sure what was out there, but if Yuki was alarmed, I wasn't about to wait around to find out. She took off at a brisk pace, glancing back to make sure I was following. I stumbled after her, my mind racing with questions. Where was she leading me? How did she know where to go? Another rumble echoed across the tundra, closer this time, and Yuki let out a low growl as if warning whatever it was to stay back. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I didn't know what was out there, but I could feel it. A presence, something dark and primal lurking just beyond sight. Yuki barked again, urging me to keep up. I forced my legs to move faster, following her paw prints in the snow as they led me deeper into the unknown. Yuki led me through the snow, her pace steady but urgent, and I followed as best I could, stumbling over unseen ground and drifts that seemed to swallow my legs whole. The wind had perked up again, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that gnawed at my gut. Every sound was sharper, every shadow more menacing. But Yuki pressed on, her blue eyes focused, and I trusted her instinct more than my own at that moment. After what felt like an eternity of trekking through the icy wasteland, I saw it. A structure emerging from the snow, silhouetted against the darkening sky. A research station. The sight of it filled me with a surge of hope. Maybe there was someone there. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. But as we drew closer, that hope began to fade. The building looked like it had been through hell. The walls were slashed with deep claw marks, and streaks of frozen blood stained the snow around the entrance. The door hung off its hinges, barely attached, and the windows were shattered. It was a mess. A horror show of destruction that set my teeth on edge. No one could have survived this. Yuki slowed as we approached, her posture tense. She sniffed the air, then the ground, before giving a low, cautious growl. She clearly didn't like what she smelled, and neither did I. Outside of the building, a snowmobile sat partially buried in snow. It looked functional enough, though who knew if it had fuel. Still, it was a potential escape, and that was worth something. My eyes kept drifting back to the claw marks on the walls, deep gouges that had torn through metal and wood alike. Whatever had attacked my team, it had been here too. I hesitated at the doorway, staring into the dark interior. The place looked trashed, like a hurricane had swept through it. Furniture was overturned, equipment scattered, and papers littered the floor like snow. But there were no bodies, just more blood, spattered and smeared, leading off into various corners of the station. Yuki nudged me again, and I realized she was already inside, her paws silent on the floor as she moved through the wreckage. I followed her cautiously, trying not to disturb anything that might make a noise or attract attention. The last thing I needed was for that creature to come back and find me here. The interior was a maze of chaos, but amidst the destruction, I spotted a laboratory section still intact, at least partially. A computer screen glowed softly in the dim light, its power inexplicably still running. I approached it carefully, my breath fogging up the air as I leaned in closer to read the display. On the screen was a document, research data on something called the Aklot. I scrolled through it quickly, my heart sinking as I read. The Aklot was not just some myth or legend, it was real. An ancient creature, part wolf, part killer whale, that was said to hunt on both land and sea. The team had been studying it, tracking its movements, trying to understand its behavior. But something had gone wrong. They had gotten too close. Maybe they had provoked it, or maybe it had simply found them first. The notes detailed sightings of the creature, its attacks, its patterns, what it preyed on. It was intelligent, calculated, and incredibly dangerous. As I read, the pieces began to fall into place. The roar, the way it had hunted us with such precision, it wasn't just an animal. It was something far worse. Yuki padded over to the corner of the room where a small bed lay tucked against the wall, partially hidden beneath the debris. The name Yuki was stitched into the fabric, marking it as hers. She sniffed it briefly before curling up on the bed, her eyes watching me as if waiting for me to finish what I was doing. I stared at her for a moment, the realization sinking in. She must have belonged to the team here, maybe as a companion or a working dog. Somehow she had survived whatever had happened, just like me. A soft whine escaped her, then she rested her head on her paws, clearly exhausted from everything she had been through. I envied her ability to rest, even in a place like this. But there's no time to stop. I had to make a decision. The snowmobile outside could be my way out of here, if it worked. I had no idea how far I could get with it, or if the Aklot was still lurking nearby, but staying here wasn't an option. This place was a tomb, haunted by whatever had happened to those people who once called it home. I took a deep breath and reached down to scratch behind Yuki's ears. You saved me, girl. Now let's see if we can get both of us out of here. Yuki lifted her head, her tail thumping weakly against the bed. I forced myself to stand, muscles aching, and headed back to the door. The snowmobile waited outside, the tundra stretching endlessly beyond it. Somewhere out there, the Aklot was prowling, and somewhere beyond that, survival. I just had to make it. We just had to make it. The research center was eerily quiet that evening. The kind of silence that weighed heavy on the mind and made every creak and groan of the building seem amplified. I did my best to ignore it as I worked, prepping the snowmobile and gathering whatever supplies I could find. The maps were old and worn, but they would have to do. I memorized the route to the nearest outpost, assuming it still existed, and double-checked the fuel levels on the snowmobile. It had just enough to get us there, if I was careful. The doors were another matter. They had been damaged badly in the attack, and while I did my best to barricade them with overturned furniture and loose boards, it didn't feel like enough. The claw marks on the walls were a constant reminder that the Aklut could tear through whatever defenses I put up without much effort. Still, it was better than nothing. I had to believe that. Yuki stayed by my side the entire time, her presence a comforting weight amidst the chaos. When I finally found a stash of canned food in the cupboard, she sat patiently as I opened a can and filled a bowl for her. She ate hungrily, her tail wagging with each bite, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight. It was a small victory in the middle of this nightmare, but it was something. When everything was ready as it could be, I collapsed onto a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner of the room, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. Yuki curled up next to me, her warmth seeping through my jacket, and for the first time in what felt like days, I let my guard down. The sleep came in fits and starts, haunted by visions of claws and teeth, but somehow we made it through the night. Morning came with the dull grey light filtering through the broken windows. I shook off the remnants of sleep and got to work, making sure everything was secured on the snowmobile. Yuki watched me with alert eyes, her body tense, as if she sensed what was coming. We didn't have time to waste. The sooner we left, the better. But just as I was about to secure the last strap, I caught movement on the horizon. My blood ran cold. It was the Aklut. Even from this distance, its form was terrifying, an unholy hybrid of wolf and orca, towering over the snow, its massive body rippling with muscle. Its fur was sleek and dark, patches of black and white like the killer whales it was rumored to be descended from. But its head was unmistakably wolf-like, its sharp teeth bared and long, powerful tail swishing behind it, its eyes glinting with a predatory intelligence that sent a shiver down my spine. And then it saw us. The Aklut let out a deafening roar, a sound that echoed across the tundra and made the ground tremble beneath my feet. It started moving, faster than anything that size had any right to. The snow kicked up behind it as it sprinted towards us, a blur of black and white against the endless white. "Come on, Yuki!" I shouted, my heart pounding as I hoisted her onto the snowmobile's storage rack. I secured her harness to the frame and then tied the other end to my waist. She barked once, understanding the urgency, her eyes locked onto the rapidly approaching beast. I revved the engine, the snowmobile sputtering to life. We shot forward just as the Aklut closed the distance, its jaws snapping inches behind us. The machine roared across the snow, but the Aklut was relentless, keeping pace with terrifying ease. Its raw grunts filled the air, a chilling reminder of just how close it was. I leaned into the wind, using the snowmobile to go faster, but the Aklut was right there, running alongside us. Its massive form loomed over us, claws swiping at the machine, each miss sending sprays of snow and ice into the air. I could feel the heat from its breath, the ground shaking with each of its strides. Just when I thought it was over, the Aklut lunged, its jaws wide open, aiming for me. I braced for impact. But then Yuki sprang into action. With a fierce growl, she lunged forward and clamped her jaws onto the creature's nose with surprising force. The Ucklet yelped, a sound that was more shock than pain, and stumbled in its run. It tumbled head over heels, a massive blur of fur and flailing limbs. Snow exploded around it as it crashed, trying desperately to regain its footing. I didn't waste a second. The snowmobile roared ahead, putting distance between us and the creature. Yuki let go, her teeth stained with the creature's blood, and barked triumphantly as we sped away. The Ucklet tried to recover, but its movements were slower, dazed by the unexpected attack and tumble. It let out one final frustrated roar, but it was too late. We were already too far away, and speeding just too fast. The miles flew by as the snowmobile carried us farther and farther from that nightmare, the landscape blurring into a monotonous white that gradually gave way to signs of civilization. The first outpost came into view, small and sturdy against the elements, and relief washed over me like a wave. We had made it. We had survived. As I pulled up to the outpost, Yuki jumped off the snowmobile, her tail wagging as she bounded over to me. I knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug, feeling the warmth of her fur against my frozen skin. "You did good, girl," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You did real good." We'd faced down a creature from myth and legend and lived to tell the tale. And as I looked into Yuki's bright blue eyes, I knew we had both saved each other in more ways than one.